I'd like to introduce Professor Porter Johnson. He grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he went to Case Institute of Technology to get his master he did a BS degree in physics, and then he went to Princeton to get his PhD in theoretical physics. And then after some postdoctoral experience, he went to Illinois Institute of Technology, and he's been a faculty member since then.
The bat. I'll say more about the bat. The bat always has a trademark on it, and most everyone who plays baseball knows that you're supposed to hold the trademark up, or at least in some position where you hit the ball on the side, which is perpendicular to the trademark. And you know it's a very special place where you hit the ball with the bat, the sweet spot. And I'll say more about the meaning of the sweet spot, because there are several things that you have to consider. The collision between the bat and the ball is not elastic. This is a baseball I got at Dick's Sporting Goods store. It's a good one. For moral support, I always bring my glove. This is my pitcher's glove that I played with when I was in elementary school, junior high school, and high school. And I recently ran into my former catcher at a high school reunion, and he informed me that gee, you got a pretty good slider when you were a kid. And all that time I thought I was throwing a curveball. The collision between the ball and the bat is somewhat inelastic. In fact, baseballs are tested. There is we measure, baseballs are actually, a whole vat of baseballs is shot at a solid plank of Great Northern ash, and then the bounce height is measured, and the bounce height is about 1/3. So if you drop the collision between the bat and the ball, just ignoring curvature of the bat and other exotic effects, you're still going to lose 2/3 of the energy in the collision between the ball and the bat. So it's notoriously inelastic. And I should also say that baseball is anti-technology. Baseball is said to be the same sport today as it was 100, 150 years ago. But we're playing the same game under the same conditions as Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and Wee Willie Keeler and all the greats of the sport, Mickey Mantle. And okay, that's certainly not true, but it's nevertheless the tradition of baseball. So it means that certain aspects of the rules can't be changed. In particular, baseball doesn't want any technological changes, but technological changes happen anyway with baseball. It's like saying, do we live in the computer era? The answer is yes. That's true whether or not you actually own a computer. You're affected by computers in your daily life, whether you own one or not. And so it is with baseball. Other similar sports. This is the grapefruit softball. The softball is thrown somewhat differently from a baseball, the fast-pitch softball. It's kind of fun to play in a fast-pitch softball league because the pitcher stands 40 feet away from the batter and takes a windmill wind-up and takes a step. The fast-pitch softball, in contrast to a baseball, actually rises everywhere along its trajectory, whereas a baseball, the rising fastball doesn't work. Okay, I want to switch at this point to go to the back here and run through some of the slides on the PowerPoint presentation, and that involves turning out the light so that you can see the screen, and then waking the computer up, which I assume, see, it's how do I wake the computer? That's the only thing I need to know. It's in a deep slumber. There we go. Okay. Let me kill the internet. Yeah. Okay. Goodbye. No. Okay. Baseball is a very old sport, the oldest of the professional sports by far. in some sense the most mature, at least in some aspects of things. And in fact, the history of baseball is really quite parallel to and evocative of the history of the United States for the period since around 1830s. From a period of nearly 200 years in which baseball has evolved in parallel with our nation. I'll start with ideas concerning the physics of baseball. First, a few facts. I approach baseball from the viewpoint of a scientist, and therefore it's 100% metric, SI whenever possible. Baseball, little bit more than a quarter of a pound. 1 Newton is a quarter pound. I'm recommending that McDonald's change their menu from a quarter pounder to a Newton burger, but so far they haven't done that, unfortunately. The force of air resistance is very important for baseball. If you took a baseball and put it in a wind tunnel, then you would have the force of gravity acting downward, and if the wind tunnel blows upward, then you would get the dynamical lift associated with the wind going around the baseball. What you would find would be that if the wind velocity were about 40 meters per second, that the baseball would float. Now 40 meters per second, or 100 miles an hour, 90, 100, something like that, is a typical speed with which baseballs are thrown by pitchers. And in fact, air resistance is just as important as gravity. Gravity always acts downwards, so I've been told, but the force of air resistance always acts in a direction, in general, acts in a direction opposite to that of the velocity of the ball. So if the ball is going that way, air resistance will be so as to slow it down. At least that's the case if the baseball isn't rotating. We have a transition in the baseball at about 25 meters per second because we have laminar flow of the ball around of the air around the ball, or pseudo-laminar flow, and there is a resistive force in which is proportional to velocity. It was a great discovery in the early part of the 20th century that in a slightly higher regime, and in fact toward the end of the regime of laminar flow, in fact, the baseball, any object going through the air takes with it a layer of air. Something not anticipated in the Navier-Stokes equation or anything like that, but discovered empirically by Prandtl in the 20th century, that there's a layer of air that travels with the baseball. Now the Prandtl air layer that travels with the ball is responsible for much of the exotic motion of the baseball, and you don't really see it until you get up to about 25 meters per second or 60 miles an hour. And there's certainly above 40 meters per second, the forces are increased quadratically with the velocity. Between 25 and 40, it's a transitional region. Okay, so that's some stuff on the dynamics of the ball. The bat, I showed you the bat. The mass of the bat is somewhat variable according to the rule book, which everybody goes along with, international rules. The length of the bat is unconstrained. The bat must be made out of a solid piece of wood, and only a couple of species are appropriate, and the weight is somewhere 25, 35 ounces. And indeed, what we've observed in recent times is that players are using much lighter bats. Babe Ruth used a bat that weighed more than 2 kilograms, 47 ounces, I believe, and he did very well with it. He did strike out a lot. The field, pitcher to the batter, 60 feet 6 inches, 18 meters, base to base, 28 meters, and home run distances vary depending on what direction you're going, but it's on the order of 90 to 120 meters. Speed of the pitch ball, nothing interesting happens below 30 meters per second, so all pitches, including the knuckleball, have to go at least that fast, because otherwise you're just pitching batting practice fastballs and the players will hit them. The speed of, a really hot fastball goes 45 meters per second. Notice that the fastball 45 meters per second, traveling 18 meters. How long does it take the ball to go from the pitcher to the catcher? Answer is 18 over 45, or 4/10 of a second. So you have 4/10 of a second to swing. How long is 4/10 of a second? I'll say it this way. How long is a half a second? The answer is that long. The time that it takes for the super ball that I just dropped to hit the ground. That's how much time you have to swing at a baseball that's being thrown. It's a major league fastball. Now, it's hard enough to hit it this way when you just drop it on the ground. You drop it, someone else holds a bat, and they swing at it. Many people will miss it. That's actually hard. I'm only considering 1 degree of freedom. I'm only considering the ball with vertical motion only. The ball also moves horizontally and does various things. The baseball bat is not very efficient for hitting the ball because we lose 2/3 of the energy in the collision. Now that's energy in the center of mass frame. The baseball bat is rounded. Englishmen who play cricket don't understand how baseball players can ever hit anything with a bat that isn't flat, and I admit that it's challenging. In general, when the bat hits the ball, you get a lot of spin, especially if you hit the ball not straight away towards center field, as it's called, but to right field or left field. So you'll notice that balls hit to the right or to the left often curve. The hit ball goes a little bit faster than the pitched ball. In fact, you can get up to 60 meters per second or 150 miles per hour. And notice that runners don't run that fast. It's a good question, a good trivia question in a high school science class to ask, how fast can a person run? And in general, you're met with stone silence because they're struggling with miles per hour and seconds and so forth. But I'll refer to the Olympics. 100 meters, 10 seconds approximately for the world-class runners, and that's 10 meters per second. And baseball players go at speeds approaching that. Outfielders, 10 meters per second is as fast as they can go. So depending on how long the ball is in the air, the outfielder has a certain amount of time to catch the ball. And indeed, it's somewhat of a scientific mystery as to how the outfielder always seems to know to run for the ball in the right direction. Travel time, you have about a half a second, give or take a little bit, and the give or take is very important. A runner goes from base to base in 3 to 4 seconds. Here's a non-SI picture of a baseball field, which I got courtesy of one of my friends. It takes 3 to 4 seconds for the runner to go from first to second base, and the catcher can throw you out. The ball has to come from the pitcher to the catcher, and then the catcher throws the ball as you're trying to run. And they can do that in 2 to 2.5 seconds, which means that you're a second short in stealing a base, which means you always have to steal on the pitcher. The time of flight of a baseball when it's hit, how long can it stay in the air? That's simply a question of kinematics, and a typical number is 6 seconds. So after the ball is hit, 6 seconds later, it lands somewhere on the field or foul ball or whatever. 6 seconds is about it. I'll indicate quantitatively how that happens. Baseball stadiums occur in all shapes and sizes. In fact, there was a tradition of baseball for each of the stadiums to be unique, dual-purpose stadiums. The Polo Grounds of New York City, the Bronx, where the New York Giants played, was for polo, and it was adapted to baseball. Many of the stadiums involved football and baseball. They simply moved the turf to go from one sport to another. Okay, so the timing is of interest in me as a scientist. When I see baseball played, I see the game through the eyes of a scientist rather than through eyes that another person might say. How high can pop-ups go? I claim 60 meters is about it. 200 feet. So if you're building a dome over your stadium, be sure it's at least 60 meters high. That's my advice. Maximum hit distance, 150 meters. Maximum throw by an outfielder, 100 meters on the fly. And what I've shown here on this graph is a baseball trajectory. It's a plot of x versus y, but the dots are equal time intervals. I've projected the baseball at an angle of 60 meters. An angle of 35 degrees at a speed of 60 meters per second. And then I simply solve the couple differential equations to see where the ball goes. And notice that as we start, let's see, maybe I can use one of the things for this. When we start down here, the time intervals are, the ball has moved a great distance over the time interval because it's moving at 60 meters per second. Then it gets up to some apex, and notice it's about 35 meters off the ground for this particular hit. And then as it comes down, although it left over here at 35 degrees, the angle on the other side, when it's coming down, is more like 60 degrees. And this is a typical line drive home run as calculated, taking into account both air resistance and gravity. Air resistance is crucial. If you took the air out of a baseball stadium, the ball would go twice as far. The trajectory is not parabolic, and you're more than halfway there when you reach the maximum. So this is the trajectory, and outfielders understand this trajectory instinctively. Weather plays an important role in baseball. Geography plays an important role. And it's all related to the ideal gas law that we know and love in physics. The force of air resistance is determined by one thing and one thing only, and that's the density of air. If you make the density of air high, you have more air resistance, and therefore the effects of air resistance are greater. If you make the air density low, you reduce the effect of air resistance, and the baseball goes further. So if you go to, the question is, how do you make the density of air, that's mass per unit volume, how do you make that large? And you make that, well, let's say you want the ball to go further, so let's make the air density low. You want rho in this formula, mass per unit volume, to be small. High temperature will do it. Low pressure will do it, low atmospheric pressure. And if you have some control over the molecular weight of the air, then if you change that, you want a low molecular weight. So what are the effects in terms of climatology? High temperature. Baseball goes further if you have essentially fixed atmospheric pressure and high temperature. It goes further if you have a high relative, where you have a low mass, and it goes further when the atmospheric pressure is low. So, in Denver, and even more so in Mexico City, at high altitude, the air pressure is 10 to 20% less than what it is at sea level, and the ball will go significantly further because there's less air resistance. By significantly, I mean 5 to 10 meters further. So baseball games played in the summertime when it's hot, when it's humid. The humidity comes in because the air is a mixed phase gas, but the ideal gas law still applies. It's nitrogen, oxygen, a little bit of other stuff, and water vapor. And the amount of water vapor is variable, but when it's hot and the relative humidity is high before a rainstorm, then the absolute, then H2O, molecular weight 16 plus 2 or 18, replaces, say, nitrogen, which has a molecular weight of 28, and the baseball goes further. So geography matters. Notice that in the World Series, when you're playing when it's low temperature, ordinary atmospheric pressure at sea level, if you're playing in anywhere except Denver or Phoenix, if you're playing in Chicago, 200 meters above sea level, or St. Louis, a little less, or Detroit, about the same as Chicago. Notice that we the ball is constrained. At low temperature, the ball will not go as far, and the humidity doesn't matter at low temperature. What this means in practical terms is that the players hit more home runs in the summer than they do in the winter. And we see this. I certainly enjoy the World Series and the pitching classics, but I understand that the pitching classics are really occurring because of changes in the climate, because the ball just doesn't go as far. It's say 5%, travels 5% less far in a cold October, late October night than it does on a warm summer day. Okay. I'll say a little bit about the history of baseball. Alexander Doubleday has an alibi. He did not invent baseball in 1839 in Cooperstown, New York. He wasn't there, so he's innocent of all crimes associated with the invention of baseball. That's a complete myth. Baseball evolved, and everything about the myth is wrong. Baseball evolved in cities, in the big cities in the East, principally New York City, Brooklyn, the Bronx. Baseball began there, and it began with the immigrant families. You can't play baseball if you live in the country. I know this because I grew up in the country. We could never, ever get a team of 18 players. You got to live in the city to be able to get 9 guys on one side, 9 guys on another. I achieved such prowess I have as a pitcher simply because I had to pitch to both sides. We played 3 to a team, and anything hit to the right of second base was out. Baseball is an urban game. It was the children of the immigrants who played it. Another place where you can get the population density to play baseball is in the military. Now, there was no organized military in the United States until about 1850, when the Secretary of War, one Jefferson Davis, who became president of the Confederacy, actually set up a standing army and made it possible for people to be career soldiers, the very thing that contributed to the defeat of the Confederacy was set up by the future president of the Confederacy, one of the ironies. By 1865, baseball was well evolved. The quotation from Walt Whitman is based on his experiences in the U.S. Civil War as a correspondent for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And the rules gradually evolved. 1865, pitching overhand. Yeah, National League was organized during the same year in which the President of the United States got into his job, despite the fact that he was not, he did not receive a majority of the popular vote and did not win a majority in the Electoral College. So improbable as it may seem, this happened in the year 1876, and the president was Rutherford Hayes. National League was organized in that year, and the thing that's famous about Hayes actually is his wife, because she broke a tradition in the United States going all the way back to George Washington. Namely, when you go to the White House, you get a little bit of whiskey. You always get well served by the White House. I mean, Washington did this. All the founding fathers did it. Certainly, Andrew Jackson brewed his own stuff and got it and gave it out at the White House. But Hayes' wife, whose name was Lemonade Lucy, the nickname was Lemonade Lucy, banned the serving of alcohol in the White House and just about shut down the country in the process. Yeah. Between the period of 1865 and 1900, baseball was played by the immigrants, and it was a rough and tumble game. If you don't believe that, just remember the terminology: the bullpen, stealing bases, spitball, suicide squeeze. These are not names that were thunk up by the gentility. Okay, then dual leagues were organized, and the World Series began in the year 1903. It's over 100 years old. The World Series is truly a World Series. I was watching this morning to the Dutch television. Something you can get up. You can get their news online. And of the 15-minute section for this morning, 5 minutes were on the Detroit-St. Louis game of last night. 1919, baseball just about was shut down because of events that happened in Chicago, in the South Side, near my intellectual home, IIT, the White Sox scandal. Um, yeah. Various changes were made in baseball as a result of that. We entered the live ball era. Live ball doesn't mean live ball. Baseballs had been becoming more lively as a result of the advances in technology in World War I, because we were making automatic threading machines, and we're able to wind the thread on the baseball tighter, and that means it would go further. The live ball era simply gave the umpire the choice of whether to replace the baseball in the game with a new one. Now, this is the kind of baseball I played with when I was a kid, and this is the good ones, and then there were the ones when we'd knock the cover off and put tape on it and so forth. But the tradition in baseball was you start the game with a baseball, you end it with the same ball. It's called a game ball, and they still do that in the little leagues and semi-pro. One ball, one game. Whatever happens to that ball, that's your game ball. That was the tradition in the majors until 1920, and the ball became very difficult to hit, became quite schmutzig as a result of playing. Also, many of the games were played on sandlots. Sandlots is a euphemism. There are no sandlots in cities. There are mud holes, and certainly the mud holes are where they played baseball. And the original baseball parks probably were just mud holes with fences around them. The spitball was banned. Actually, it wasn't banned. It was grandfathered out because each team was allowed to keep one or two spitball pitchers, and anyone that was throwing a spitball as of 1920 could continue. Ty Cobb once said the spitball was his favorite pitch. He loved to hit the spitball because of all the pitches, that was the one he really wanted to get. Because although many people tried to throw the spitball, very few could throw it well. Yeah, we go on in time. Babe Ruth saved baseball. There were very strict rules as to how Ruth how players were to behave in the 20s. Babe Ruth was suspended in the 1924 season because of what was called barnstorming, and as nearly as I can tell, much of the barnstorming was done when he was playing on racially mixed teams of white players and black players, and Judge Landis banned a black team from playing a white team. The reason actually was that the black team usually won. The stars of the Negro Leagues of the 20s and the 30s were systematically beating the teams in the American and National League, although the African Americans were prohibited from being in the majors at that point. 1932, common standards for baseball. It just happens that the year before that, Hack Wilson of the famous Chicago Cubs hit lots of home runs and batted in 190 runs in one season, 154-game season. And in general, that's felt to be because of the baseball, because he never made it that well. That over 100 RBIs after that. A big change from the viewpoint of the players, night baseball. The one record which I believe is statistically improbable that it will ever be broken, Joe DiMaggio of the Yankees hit safely in 56 consecutive games. Good exercise in physics. Suppose the probability of getting a hit on a particular day, getting one hit per game is 0.95. You do it 95% of the time. You ask yourself, how many games do you play before it's statistically probable that you miss one? How many in a row can you string in? And the answer is about 20. 1947, a very important occasion for baseball and also probably for society. Jackie Robinson joined the team of the Brooklyn Dodgers, first African American player in the majors. Very courageous man who took the brunt of the insults so that others could play. 61, Roger Maris hit an extended season, 61 home runs, but he didn't break the Babe's record. 1962, Ty Cobb's record of stolen bases of 97 was broken by Maury Wills. I have to say, Ty Cobb stole home 45 times during his career, going from third to home. And do you know how many times Maury Wills stole home? 0. Yeah. So, yeah, the Ty Cobb's record of base running stands. The modern era, the rules continue to evolve. We don't recognize that these are significant. They may or may not be significant. This rule changed in 1971 doesn't seem to have had any effect. The designated hitter rule. Pete Rose, who was banned from baseball, broke Ty Cobb's lifetime record of number of hits because of gambling. Ty Cobb was a true psychopath. You only want one of those on a team. He once went running up into the stands to beat up on a fan, and it turned out that the fan who was yelling at him was a quadriplegic. He couldn't use either his arms or his legs. Okay. Yeah, 1998 home run records break. You can say, yeah, that's because of steroids, and steroids were illegal. Probably true. They weren't illegal at the time in baseball. But certainly in retrospect, we think of these records as having asterisks on them. On the other hand, we don't put asterisks on Babe Ruth's record itself because he was probably addicted to a habit-forming narcotic, namely alcohol, an illegal habit-forming drug. Because his records were all set during the Prohibition era, and he flaunted the authorities with his interest in by breaking them. So it's absolutely nothing new that baseball players are controversial. Ty Cobb's antics go back 100 years. So do his moments of glory. Ty Cobb led a group of baseball players in World War I in the United States, the Allied Expeditionary Force in France, and he was a captain, and he was in combat in the foxholes. And Christy Mathewson experienced a poison gas attack during this experience. And although he was the best pitcher in the National League, he never pitched successfully after that experience. And yeah, Barry Bonds. What I think is also interesting is the internationalization of baseball, that Ichiro Suzuki got more hits in a single season than George Sisler did in 1920. And this is a significant record because nobody before that had even come close. But it indicates the interest in baseball of having small ball versus let me put all of these on. There are other sports in which you have a projectile where you either throw it or hit it or do something to it. Cricket is similar to baseball in that you've got a batsman, a hurler, and a wicket. Of all the sports on this list, and there is one more, baseball has a unique defining characteristic that none of the others, well, softball has the same thing. Baseball and softball have the unique characteristic that when you look at the games in a mirror, they're wrong. You can't, the runner looks like he's running around the bases the wrong way if you do a reflection in a mirror. Whereas the other games, including cricket, are left-right symmetric. The important thing in cricket is to throw. The hurler throws the ball, and the ball's got a little ring around it, and this is analogous to the seams on a baseball that dominate its behavior. And the idea is to knock the wicket off the knock the wicket off the stand that it's on, and in general the ball bounces, and the bounce happens very close to the wicket, and the batsman is supposed to be up there to prevent it. Soccer, I say we have archaic refereeing there, based on my observations of recent soccer games, including the recent World Cup and the headbutt. I'm convinced that the referee did not see the headbutt, but he figured he better call it when he looked up on the big screen and saw that 500 million people had seen the headbutt. Yeah. The banana kick is something that you kick in from the sidelines where you want the ball to be angling in toward the goal, and that's much like the curving that I was doing with the trackball. Tennis, the collision is more elastic. In golf is technology friendly. It says make better golf balls, make better golf clubs. Golf simply says we'll move the fairways back so that a par 4 is a fair shot. If that's 200 meters, then you put it there. If it's 300 meters, someone gets better golf clubs and golf balls, and you just move the fairways back so that something on the order of 4 shots per hole, 72 for an 18 holes. That's about the right number. Softball is more difficult to hit than baseball because the pitcher is closer, and also because I think the density of the ball is less, and there's more turbulence is a greater effect. Badminton, say why that's there. In part because there was a letter to Physics Today about 4 years ago by someone who said there were too many books on the physics of XXX and that all such books should be banned. And he said the one topic, well, badminton and hurling, I think, are the only ones that he couldn't figure they had written books on. So I thought I'd better say something about badminton. And why is it on the list? The answer is that of all the sports in which a projectile is shot, hit, blasted, kicked through the air, the shuttlecock in badminton achieves the greatest speed, only for a short period of time. But the collision between the shuttlecock, the birdie, and the badminton racket is such that a heavy object hits a light object and transmits, and the light object goes away at high speed. In fact, the speeds there are like 80 meters per second versus 40 for the baseball and comparable numbers for other things. So it's for about that far, the shuttlecock is traveling with great speed. And in fact, enough so that if you're playing doubles and one player hits the other player in the eye, there are serious consequences. And of course, lacrosse, in a sense, a more ancient game. I suppose I should mention Latke, the Russian game. Baseball is an international sport, and we had a world tournament last March. And what's interesting is that the United States placed in the top category of the top 8, but not in the top 4. There were 16 nations entering, and the U.S. was in the top 8. The top 4 were Japan, Cuba, Mexico, and Korea. And what I think is interesting is that Japan actually won. They beat Cuba. Cuba has amateur baseball, so-called amateur baseball in the closing stages of the Castro era, their amateurs are major league quality baseball players, whereas the Japanese have a few stars who do very well in the United States, a couple on each team actually, and every time those players play, the Nippon TV reporters are here, and the game goes right back to Tokyo, and people are watching it in the middle of the night. I've done several things at Sox Park, U.S. Cellular Field, and the Japanese reporters are always there. Nippon TV is sending that game back if there's one player from Japan. Japan won, and the reason is that baseball is a team sport, and the Japanese play well on a team. No matter how good the individual is, and this has been true for 150 years and may be true for a long time to come, no matter how good one player is, he can be the greatest player that ever played. That doesn't mean the team is going to win games. That's something completely different. All right. A couple of things that I've said already that I'll repeat here, that the stitches on the baseball determine its dynamics. If it weren't for the stitches, then the surface would be uniform, but the orientation of the stitches is crucial. The stitches provide a mechanism for you to make the ball spin, to make it go faster, and they're very important in dominating the dynamics of the baseball. If the stitches were smaller, the baseball would be easier to hit. If the stitches were a little bigger, if they stuck up half a centimeter on the baseball, then nobody could hit it. Yeah, 20 revolutions from 0 to 20 for a pitcher. That's in a half a second, so 40 per second and 2,400 RPMs. The knuckleball is really hard to throw, and it's orientation, seam orientation dependent. A knuckleball pitcher wants the ball to rotate a fraction of one turn, so that when the knuckleball leaves the pitcher's hand and is going toward you, the batter, the seams are on, say, on the left side, the front seams, and the ball will shift, that is flutter slightly to the left. But if the ball rotates a little bit, the knuckleball, the seams will be in the other direction. It will unflutter or flutter back to where it was going. Numerology, baseball is absolutely fascinating from the point of view of statistics. Pitchers get really tired after 100 pitches. These days they take out the pitcher based on how tired he is and the number of pitches. In the days of Cobb and Beirut, the pitcher went in and it was his game, win, lose, or draw. And maybe they had a relief pitcher, maybe not. Yeah. This part is simple enough about Cobb and his remembrance of Walter Johnson. One of the scouts for Walter Johnson was reporting on his performance in Montana and said, he's a great pitcher. And they said, does he have good control? And the scout said, yes, he must have good control, because otherwise there would be dead bodies all over the state of Montana. The baseball must be hit with extreme precision. You have a half a second to decide whether you're going to commit yourself to swing. And committing yourself is a judgment call of the home plate umpire, who can now, as of the last couple of years, choose to consult with either the first base or the third base umpires, whether the batter has broken his wrist, so to speak. And it's a somewhat arbitrary convention. But since you only have a half a second, you have to start swinging ahead of time. Bat-ball collision lasts for a millisecond, and the force is around 10,000 newtons. Baseball players have incredibly quick reflexes, because otherwise they couldn't hit the ball. If you study speeds of transmission of nerves in the body, it's a few meters per second, and the distance here, say it's a meter. That means that a signal can't go from your noodle to your hand to tell you to do something in much less than a tenth of a second or so. And that's sort of consistent. Let's see, I was going to do this to drop. I'll just talk about doing this. If you drop a dollar bill and then have someone else try to catch it, you'll find that it's, unless the person knows when you're going to drop it, they will not be able to get it. And the time involved here is 0.15 seconds, or thereabouts. 0.15, 0.17 seconds. This is 15 millimeters, 15 centimeters, 6 inches. Yeah. Ted Williams wrote a book in which he described hitting a baseball the way I would do it if I were a scientist writing the book. Yeah. It is difficult to predict the flight of the baseball, including and also difficult to predict the pitches that are thrown. There's only one pitch that we have really good quantitative agreement in between our models and the behavior of the ball. Does anyone know what that one is? The one we understand best. No. 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 Knuckleball. And why is that simple? Because it hardly spins at all, and you can do perturbation theory and treat the spin as being small. So you can analyze the knuckleball, because it's an orientation seam dependent thing. Yeah. The spin of the baseball is very important for someone who wants to catch it. And yeah, this is just a reminiscence of Bobby Shantz, a pitcher for the lowly Philadelphia Athletics, who had the problem. Williams, incidentally, is Ted Williams. Leo Durocher's statement about Willie Mays. Just played baseball. Fundamentals on baseball. These are all on my website, by the way. I'll just kind of flash through them a little bit. Cobb. Cobb was a left-handed batter. And his favorite way of getting on base was a drag bunt along the first base line, which he did in order to get on base. He always held his hands with some separation. His batting would be more like this, so just a couple of inches, a few centimeters apart. And this way, he was essentially ready to do a drag bunt. Of course, if the first baseman runner came in on him, then he didn't drag bunt, and his batting average over the years was sufficiently good to win the title in most times. Now you can say, well, Ty Cobb didn't play night baseball. He didn't fly on airplanes. He didn't have to confront the slider. He didn't have to face the closer. On the other hand, he did have to deal with bean balls on a regular basis. And he was doing it without a helmet. Good advice. Don't pull a curveball from a right-hander. Excellent. Yeah. This is some of the best advice. He actually wrote this down when he was 60-something years old. Ball bat is a wondrous weapon. Ty Cobb died a rich man. He made very little money on baseball, played for the Detroit Tigers most of his life. Then they got tired of him and traded him to Philadelphia. He started before the turn of the century and lasted into the 20s and played with Babe Ruth in the same league. He consistently batted well. And he gave this advice after he died. He didn't make money on baseball. He made money because he bought Coca-Cola stock around the time of World War I. And that was when Coke had real cocaine in it, and things really did go better with Coke in those days. Before the Food and Drug Administration came along. Okay, the catcher, in a sense, sees everything. The catcher is crucial to a baseball team. I don't think you have a good baseball team without one. Your pitchers don't know what to do. They don't know what to hit. They don't get the strategy. The catcher blocks the umpire's view so that the umpire can mess up balls and strikes, which in my opinion happens about 10% of the time. It happens so often that when you watch the World Series or any league game that's authorized by Major League Baseball, they don't let them re-show the pitches because they don't want people to see it's, half a foot outside. They don't want people to know that, but that's the catcher's job. Okay. Catchers get banged around a bit. I was never a catcher because there have been almost no left-handed catchers. Yeah. Fielding is non-trivial. Next to the catcher's position, I think the hardest position to play is third base, because first you have to keep the ball from killing you, then you have to knock it down, and then you have to make a long throw to first base, and you have to get those things off quickly. The third baseman is a miraculous thing. Various baseball quotations. There's a place on the website where you can get a lot of these. I'll just say one. Hitting is timing. Pitching is upsetting timing. The hitter starts swinging before the pitcher throws the ball, and the pitcher has to do something legal, not to upset his timing. Stopping and hesitating is a balk, unless that's your normal delivery. If you stop and hesitate on every single pitch, it's okay. I won't put in the one that Babe Ruth said about Ty Cobb, or the one that Ty Cobb said about Babe Ruth, but you can have fun looking them up on the web. I think to paraphrase what Ty Cobb said about Babe Ruth, he used the N word in describing Babe Ruth. And it's probably true. Babe Ruth was mixed racial heritage. I think that statement is true. I think it's also true of Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb was of mixed racial inheritance. Certainly true of me. I am of mixed racial heritage. And it's true of all of you, in my opinion. You are of mixed racial heritage. 100 generations ago, we had a common ancestor, a common female ancestor. Okay. Yogi Berra, can't leave him out. One of the great intellects of the baseball era. When Yogi was in the 7th grade in his schools in St. Louis, the teacher said, "Young man, don't you know anything?" And he said, "Lady, I don't even suspect anything." Types of pitches: cut fastball. These are the ones that are thrown at high speed. Yeah, And there are various ways of holding, but the idea is they go fast. A good pitcher, 40 meters per second. If you just throw the ball fast without activity, the pitchers will hit it. The batters will hit it. If it's just fast but straight, it's going to get hit. So you want to do something. The cut fastball can move in on a right-handed batter. You press down on the second finger. Four-seam fastball has activity on it. Rising, sinking fastball, the hopping fastball. The hopping fastball occurs as a result of the parental layer and turbulence. Class 2 of pitches, the signal 1 from the catcher to the pitcher is the universal signal for the fastball, and number 2 is the universal signal for the curveball. And it's sometimes called a drop. In fact, the dropping is the most important part. If you can make the vertical distance change by a centimeter, then the batter is not going to hit it. If he's off by a centimeter, he's not going to hit it. He's going to hit it into the dirt or miss it entirely. Screwball occurs the wrong way. The sharp breaking curve, higher speed. The slider, the great pitch that's perfected in recent times, slider rotates about a vertical axis. Fastball, well, the curveball is rotated at a tilted axis, so it curves as well as drop, and the dropping is what really makes it hard to hit. The slider looks like a fastball but isn't. It's slightly slower, and slower ball means if you're gauging it to hit it at this height, it'll be just a little lower and you'll miss it. Or better yet, you'll pop it up. Let's see, I just did something stupid. Seam orientation dependent balls. The knuckleball, scuff ball, spit ball, split finger fastball, fork ball, and one that only the Japanese seem to do, the Gyroball, which is reminiscent of a football. Football, when you throw it, I was never able to learn to throw the football because you do exactly the opposite in throwing a pass in a football from a baseball. Baseball, you always snap your wrist. With a football, you never do that. You want to release the ball off your hand and have it to rotate about the long axis. The baseball that rotates about its long axis, so the helicity is positive, so the velocity and the angular velocity are in the same direction. That's called the Gyroball, and the Japanese do it very well. It has the effect of catching up on you. It comes in much more quickly than you think it's going to. And if you can fool a batter into thinking the ball is going to be less quick than it is, then it's hard to hit. Okay, knuckleball, traditional seam with the four fingers, and off-speed pitches, changeup. Okay, so I've sort of named 4 kinds of pitches. There really are 5 because the curveball and the slider are different in a different category. Which one is the hardest to hit? It's universally agreed among batters as to what's the hardest pitch to hit. Does anybody know? They all say the same thing. Which one's the hardest to hit? Changeup. Yeah. Because not only do you miss it, you misjudge it. The changeup is thrown with the same move as a fastball, but with a fastball you're holding it up here, and changeup you do exactly the same motion, but you're holding the ball in the palm of your hand. And as a result, you have to practice to do this really well, but as a result, the hitter thinks it's going to be a fastball, but it turns out not to be. Baseball is most real in the Hollywood versions of it, and I've listed my favorite films, the ones that are biographical. I think Lou Gehrig, played by Gary Cooper in The Pride of the Yankees. Jimmy Pearsall, played by Jimmy Pearsall in Fear Strikes Out. 8 Men Out, about the Chicago White Sox. The movie Cobb of 1994 with Tommy Lee Curtis playing Ty Cobb. And then, of course, everyone knows who Jimmy Morris was, a film called The Rookie. Does anyone know who he was? Okay, good. Fiction. My world favorite is Bull Durham. It's played in the minor leagues, and the player never really goes to the major leagues. One player is on his way up, one is on his way down. Susan Sarandon is the English teacher who likes baseball players. To understand baseball, it's good to see how it's played in the minor leagues, because in the major leagues they hardly ever make stupid mistakes, whereas in the minors, equal numbers of smart and stupid mistakes. My favorite. Number 2, baseball gets in touch with its feminine side, A League of Our Own. Filmed in the Chicago area, era. And in fact, Madonna and Gina Davis learned to play on the IIT baseball field. They practiced with the coach for that one. This is about the true story. In fact, that during World War II, there was a women's professional baseball league, and the star team was one in Rockford. And incidentally, if there are any Red Sox fans here, it's important that I inform you that the coach of the baseball team described in A League of Our Own was one Jimmy Fox, the Red Sox hitter. I say that because I'm a Yankees fan. Okay, Mr. Baseball takes place entirely in Japan, about an American player in Japan. For the Love of the Game, Detroit Tigers, see it. The Natural, Robert Redford, so forth. Okay, baseball was originally a sport for the teeming immigrant masses, and to make it more respectable, a song was written. And this is the version of Take Me Out to the Ball Game. This is the verse. You may know the chorus, but this is the verse. It's specifically to try to make baseball palatable to respectable people. And the way it was done was to try to get the girl next door to go with you to the ball game. So the song is about a girl, Katie Casey in 1908, and then Nellie Kelly in the later version. Okay, now you know the chorus. Okay. Yeah. So the idea is, how do you market baseball? You get the girl next door to go with you. My favorite team? Yeah. I admit I'm a little weak on the position of third base. I'm confident on the others. Garrigan, first base. Ted Williams, the greatest hitter of all time, the right fielder. Willie Mays, center fielder. Cobb in left field. I don't know how that's going to work out in sociological terms with Cobb and Willie Mays on, but I do know you don't want more than one psychopath on a team. Sandy Koufax, left-handed pitcher, and Bobby Feller, right-handed pitcher. These are my judgments. Now, my favorite player of all time is Willie Mays, because he could beat you in so many ways. He could hit, he could run, he could throw, he could bunt, he could catch. Babe Ruth was a pitcher. He was the best pitcher in the majors for his first 7 or 8 years. Willie Mays could have pitched also. I know that because he could throw the ball from center field to home plate on the fly and hit the catcher. And that's much harder than getting the ball over the plate. It may be that the greatest baseball film is the one that hasn't yet been made, about Satchel Page. And this is some of his advice. I like the one, don't avoid running at all costs. He's right about the fried foods. They do angry up the blood, and that was about a century ago. Yeah. Yeah, let me say more about Satchel Page. That he actually began. He played in the Negro League starting in the late 20s, early 30s, and he began in my hometown with the Chattanooga Black Lookouts, the black team. There was a white team and a black team. Guess which one was better? And then when he was in his 50s, he made it up to the majors and played in the majors for 5 or 10 years after Jackie Robinson came along, and he did very well. But I think the story of that man and how he played. Apparently, he could pitch both games of a doubleheader and not have a sore arm. He was absolutely amazing. For those of you that need to have baseball translated into another language, I like the Québécois. Montreal got this off some website. It would be easy to translate it into Spanish, right? This one is a little more exotic. Yeah. These are all on the website. Receveur for catcher, première, deuxième, troisième, first, second, third base, so forth. Recrue, recruiter, so forth. Erreur. Okay. Finally, the references. The PDF version of this talk is up on my webpage, and if you click on Northsiders versus Southsiders, the Stankwatts thing, you learn the sociological differences in the two. And I'm very fond of Randy Johnson, Fastball Strikes Bird. But since that's proprietary and I don't own it, I just have the hot link to it. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, we have some time for questions. If you have any questions about baseball, please go ahead. Go ahead. Yes.
How, with the suspected dirt on Kenny Rogers'
Dirtgate,
hands,
yes.
how would that help a pitcher's ability to throw more effectively?
In generic terms, the pitcher wants to have a good grip on the ball. He wants a rough baseball so he can grip it and put more stuff on it. And pitchers are allowed to do certain things like rub the baseball. They're also allowed to blow on their fingers and try to warm them up. And that's especially important on a cold day. They're allowed to put stuff on ahead of the game, but what they're not allowed to do is to use either Vaseline, the material of choice for the foreign substance ball, or pine tar, resin. They're not allowed to put those directly onto the ball, although they can have them on their hands. Now, this rule is a fairly new one, and it's not clear how it can be enforced, but I guess the idea is to cut down on the foreign substance ball. I didn't see the incident of the Tigers' second game, first inning, but it's interesting that the day after that I got a call from a St. Louis radio station saying, hey, we want to put you on the radio in 20 minutes to talk to our fans about Dirtgate. Fortunately, I'd read about, I started watching the game in the fourth inning and then saw it rebroadcast. It was not a violation of the rules of baseball as to what happened, because if it is to be challenged that the pitcher has something on his hand, the manager of the opposing team has to do it, and he didn't do it until after such time as the stuff had disappeared. So as a result, there was no infraction. Baseball is extremely clear about the fact that you don't recall the balls and strikes or recall the outs and the safe calls the next day. The decision of the umpire or umpires at the time is irrevocable and final. So even if the ball is that far out of the strike zone, either above it, below it, or on one side of it, down in the dirt, even if the umpire misses the call, unless the umpire himself changes it, it doesn't count. Unless the manager of the opposing team calls it, then it didn't happen. It's consistent with the rules. And so there was no violation of the rules. Pitcher was surely not throwing a spitball. A spitball looks like a split-fingered fastball. It's almost indistinguishable as to how to tell the difference. The idea on a spitball, it's called a spitball, although the spit doesn't work. You have to have, it's seam orientation dependent. You have to have a smooth layer on the back of the ball, and somehow the seams have to be oriented appropriately, much like a knuckleball. And the split-fingered fastball or the forkball is just a question of degree. You throw it that way, and then the idea is that you can create something that simulates a spitball. And yeah, pitcher was not throwing split-fingered fastballs. He was throwing sharp-breaking curves. He simply wanted to get a better grip on the ball. And pitchers always want to do that. They like to rub the ball. Actually, the ball is rubbed ahead of time with dirt. There's a special formulation of Susquehanna mud. Comes in little packets, and they rub it on the baseballs. This is a ritual that the umpires and officials do before the baseball game. And they must use about 100 baseballs in a game. Something on the order of that. In fact, I always had a sound argument as to why baseballs were not doctored, why they aren't juiced. Anyone could juice one baseball, make it do funny things. You got to juice 1 million baseballs, because that's the number they're played with in the major leagues during the season, and they all got to be the same. And they're hand sewn in Costa Rica, and they cost $15 each maximum. And okay. That, I think, is impossible, to be exotic in selling juiced baseballs. Of course, I do think that baseball is the only thing in the park that wasn't juiced. The players are juiced, pitcher's mound was lowered, the parks are all wind engineered, including our Sox Park as of last year. They're oriented in such a way that the prevailing winds make the ball go further, and so forth. The strike zone was visibly shrunk in relation to what it was supposed to be in the rule books. I personally think there ought to be an asterisk on Mark McGwire's home run record, because for him anything above the waist was a ball, whereas for Sammy Sosa, anything that didn't hit him in the head, first of all, he was going to strike, he was going to swing at it, and second, the umpires were going to call it a strike because he had a big strike zone. And these subjective things were very important in baseball until the year 2000 when uniform standards were put in. Should let someone else ask a question if you want to.
Questions? Yeah.
What sort of gain in power does a batter acquire with a cork bat?
None. To a zeroth approximation. The only reason you want a cork bat is it's more, you can swing it more quickly and wait longer before you hit it. If anything, it's probably a little less efficient. Now a light bat, 31 ounces or 900 grams, whatever that is, that's good. The theoretical calculations of Alan Nathan and his Australian collaborators say that it seems to be reasonable that the mass of the ball multiplied by 5 should be equal to the mass of the bat. And if this is 150 grams, that times 5 is 750. So you'd like to be able to have a 750 gram bat, 25 ounces or something. The bats that people use are slightly heavier than that, but my feeling is that fact doesn't make very much difference, because if it's the maximum impact under certain circumstances, when you change it by 10%, because you're at the peak, you get a 1% change. If you're just considering pool, and let's see, I guess everybody knows in freshman physics that you get the maximum impact, maximum energy transferred to the ball when the ball and the bat, when the two balls are like on pool, equal mass. But if the mass differs by 10%, the change in energy is only 1%. And I think it's the same with the baseball and the bat. The mass of the bat is not critical, except that you can wait longer before you swing a lighter bat. And that's crucial.
Why not just use a lighter bat?
You got to make it out of a single piece of Great Northern ash, and it's got to be structurally stable. You'll notice the bats today are very thin. I saw an Atlanta player that swung at the ball, missed the ball, and the bat severed off in his hand. It was surely true that he had cracked the bat on the previous pitch, but he still, just to swing into the air was of sufficient strength that the bat broke off. The bats are weaker than they used to be, and part of the reason is they're lighter. Another part of the reason is that they're dried quickly in microwave ovens rather than being slow dried the way bats were in ancient vintage. Yeah, and they're fragile. You want the mass out there near the sweet spot, not down on the handle.
Any other questions?
Recently, some people have been switching to maple bats instead of ash.
There are some players who are switching to maple bats. They don't seem to break as quickly. It's purely psychological. My psychologist friend at IIT goes around and talks about baseball from a motivational viewpoint. And he knows from nothing about physics, but he knows people, at least how people react. He's interested in that subject. If you believe that a maple bat makes the ball go further, you should use it. If you believe that you can put the curse on the bat from your old girlfriend and you have to get it off with a chicken's head, do it. Whatever it takes. If you believe that you should only eat spaghetti until your slump is over, that's what you should do, because baseball players need to be motivated and need to feel good about themselves. If you believe in voodoo, then voodoo works. That's all there is to it. Never mind what a scientist would say. If a baseball player misses the ball because the hex is put on him, then I would certainly believe it. Yeah, so I don't know. There are only 3 or 4 species of wood that is appropriate for a bat. Those are probably the best ones.
Isn't the college game using aluminum bats?
Everything below the professional levels uses aluminum bats. I'm against that, by the way, because I think it's dangerous. I think with an aluminum bat, there isn't time for the pitcher to get out of the way of the ball when it's hit right back at him, because the collision between the ball and the aluminum bat is potentially more elastic aluminum bats have been changed in the last couple of years so that they're neutral with that regard. Some of the leagues require aluminum bats that are somehow compensated so that you can't hit the ball further with an aluminum bat than with a wooden bat. But even if you can't, it still makes a big difference on the game because with the aluminum bat, the collision is more elastic and you can have the trampoline effect and the ball simply comes back more quickly. And furthermore, if you hit the ball, if you hit the ball on the handle of the bat with a wooden bat, you break the bat, your hands hurt, and the ball pops up and the catcher catches it. If you hit an aluminum bat on the handle, your hands still hurt, but it may just happen to pop over the third baseman's head and you end up with a double. And pitchers, as a result, are in the pre-professional era, are reticent to throw the high inside fastball, one of the crucial pitches of baseball, simply because with an aluminum bat, things can go horribly wrong accidentally. And as a result, even though aluminum bats are banned in all the pro leagues, because all the players in the United States go through the colleges and the little leagues where they're used, and it makes a difference. And aluminum bats are absolutely prevalent. I was trying to do an interview on television once to find a wooden bat, and none of the coaches at IIT had one, except one guy who had gotten one at a White Sox game for some kind of a reward for attendance. They're becoming more common, and I think they should simply be used. The number of fatalities has increased significantly in baseball as a result of the use of aluminum bats, in my opinion. It's kind of hard to prove the statistics because you're dealing with small numbers, but I feel that.
You calculated the height of a pop-up, but how far is the
Max.
maximum distance you can hit a baseball? Not counting like in the ballparks.
I was saying, by my model, if you hit the ball off the Sears Tower and ask how far it will go, it only goes as far as 150 meters away from the base. And the reason is air resistance, because it's something like the same question of if you jump out of an airplane, how far forward do you land? Why the answer is for about 4 seconds. Well, you got to get to the terminal speed, which is 40 and down. So if your initial downward component of speed is 0, 4 seconds to get to 40 meters per second. And so the horizontal distance traveled in 4 seconds would essentially be the right answer. That's 160 meters with the baseball. And I think the actual limitation more like 120 or 130. I don't believe in 700-foot home runs. I believe 500 is pretty good. Yeah. They're intrinsic limitations. And incidentally, not all baseballs are the same. Even by tolerances are the ones they test. It's plus or minus, I think, 3% on the coefficient of restitution, 0.53 to 0.56. So that means that one ball goes out of the park, the other one's going to land 5 meters inside and be an out.
I know that a lot of baseball players are very particular about the bat they use because they feel that it's hot or something. But how much do individual bats vary in terms of performance, like you were saying the ball did?
Baseball players have a collection of hundreds of bats, and each one costs several $100s. Major League wood, the special slow-growth ash that most of the players use. I don't know. They feel it's important. My attitude is, I'm the amateur and they're the professionals. It would be stupid and presumptuous of me to tell them how to play baseball better. That would be as stupid as my telling an experimentalist how to build a spark chamber, or an astronomer how to make the best telescope. I simply don't know. I admire what they're able to do and understand some of the things of it, but basically it's an art. And I recommend the reading of Ted Williams' book. He always took the first pitch. Every time I saw him pitch, he would let the first pitch go by, because he said one of his rules was never try to hit a pitch unless you've seen it before. So what's the pitcher's fastball? He always took the first pitch. Then the next question, is the second pitch like the first? If it is, then he hits it. If the next pitch is a curveball, you take that one too. Then you've seen the fastball and the curveball. Then the pitcher comes in and he's ready to throw. Now, first time out, perhaps first time at bat, Williams would not be so great against a pitcher, but he remembered things and he had eyesight of one person in a million, extremely quick reflexes, and did very well. The greatest hitter of all time, in my opinion.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
How important is the batter's eye?
Is what?
The batter's eye, the thing that for getting the ball in sight, they look at a black area opposite.
Oh, I think Robert Adair says that you can turn the lights out in the stadium after the ball's 2/3 of the way in, and it doesn't matter. You only see the ball for the first 2/3. There are some pitches that I don't think the players see at all. The Randy Johnson fastball coming out of, the sky, the one that got the bird. That's one of the things I have on here. Randy Johnson fastball strikes bird. You click on this on my website and you get the image. Certainly no more than halfway. I mean, the idea is you got to start swinging. You have to do your fastball swing or your curveball swing or your slider swing and have some indication of where the ball is going to go before the pitch is halfway there. Now that's what's so deadly about the curveball, especially the slider. You see it coming, and because it's got this orientation, that makes your brain think that it's actually going faster than it is. So it's the rotation masking translational motion that the hitter misjudges. When it's passing you here, that's 1 meter, and at 40 meters per second, that's 1/140th of a second, and you can't follow that if you're standing sideways. That's like trying to see the lines move on the television screen. You don't follow anything more than about 1/10 or so of a second. So you don't see it there at all. You don't see the ball. You can't follow the ball to hit the bat. You can imagine how it goes, but you do not see it. And so when you're up there hitting, you're doing your fastball swing. If the pitcher throws a fastball, you may be able to hit it, maybe not. If you're doing a fastball swing and it's a curveball, then you will not hit it in general. But you've already committed yourself the minute essentially, by the time soon after the ball leaves the pitcher's hand, you have to think, where's it going? You have to think this instinctively. Where's it going? Where's it going to end up? Is it going to be here or here? And if it's here, it's soon, whereas, remember, the 1.2 meters depends on what the horizontal speed is. You take the horizontal speed down by 10%, that distance changes by 20%, and you got to get it within a centimeter to avoid popping it up or hitting it in the ground. So, the millisecond timing. Tough.
One more question to ask, last question. Yeah.
So how do you actually get to foul the ball? I mean, that's something that people seem to know how to do, and they can stand the advance several.
How do I get to foul the ball?
Yeah.
I either hit it too soon or too late. Oh, you hit it purposely too soon. You see, that's just, you're hitting it at the right place, but at slightly the wrong time. When you hit it ahead of time, left-handed batter hitting it, even if you hit it out into right field, because of the fact that you've hit it obliquely on the bat, the ball gets a lot of spin and usually occurs foul. A right-handed batter, the ball may be fair when it passes third base, but the question is, where does the ball hit the ground? And if it hits in fair territory, it's fair. But very often the ball curves foul. And that's because you've hit it too soon. If you foul it off on the other side, it's too late, and your timing slot there, that's a hundredth of a second. It's a thousandth of a second, that's the collision, the contact time. And the baseball goes flat.
How do you do it on purpose?
You swing early on purpose. I'm not Yogi Berra, I don't know.
Nobody does it on purpose anymore. The last guy I remember.
No, you want to do it on purpose.
He's stanky.
No.
They do do it on purpose.
The great Luke Appling certainly did. Yogi Berra did.
That's before my time.
Luke
And
Appling,
he's
before your
stanky.
time.
It's not before my time.
Okay, yeah. No, there are players that do it now. And it's important that you have one of those guys on your team. Why were the Yankees great? It wasn't just Ruth and Gehrig. It was Corsetti and Lazzeri, the scat-back shortstop second base team. They would foul off the balls endlessly. Yogi Berra was an excellent man at fouling balls. You raise the pitch count. You wear out the pitcher. And then when that number gets up to 100 or 120 or whatever, they bring in another pitcher. And maybe he's easier to hit. I mean, you wear the pitcher out. You know, the strategy is maybe you don't even try for the first couple of innings if you've got someone with a really hard fastball that you can't hit. But the more pitches you foul off, the higher the pitch count is and the tireder the pitcher gets. I mean, I think that's a strategy. And it's hard to do well. Yeah, some of the White Sox are pretty good at that these days. Not like the legendary Luke Appling, but good. That's important because you want the pitcher tired when the leadoff man
What you say
comes
is
up.
completely true, then the high walk count would not be power hitters, which it is. It would be nickel hitters who would deliberately try to get a walk and get on base.
Well, the power hitters walk because the pitchers pitch carefully to them, whereas the nickel hitters, I think they're more likely to throw strikes. You don't want to throw a strike to Pujols. You do not want to do that. You do not want that ball over the plate. You want to catch him swinging at a bad ball. And he walks a lot. But a player who's a scat back hitter, I don't know, Iguchi for the Sox, for example, you know, when he's at his best, he fouls off a lot of pitches. You don't want to walk that guy. You want to get him out. Doesn't always work, but that's what you want. So the high walks are just because of the careful pitching. If the pitcher can't throw a strike every time, if he has to, he won't be in the majors very long. You don't want to throw a strike that ends up in the next county to one of the power hitters. I don't have Babe Ruth on my all-time team because he struck out too much. Gehrig hit about the same number of home runs and more RBIs. Ruth's greatness was always caused by the fact, I thought, that they knew if Ruth got on the base, they'd still have to pitch to Gehrig, and they didn't want Ruth on the base. The walking of the power hitters is just because they pitch carefully. It's also because hitters with a good eye have traditionally had a very small strike zone. What you want is a power hitter that hits a high average and doesn't strike out very much. For example, Frank Thomas is in that category, where Sammy Sosa was not. He always walked a lot, struck out a lot, and hit a lot of home runs. About all he did, as far as I can tell. The Cubs, I don't mean to be down on the Cubs. The Cubs have an absolutely great baseball player today, and that's Zambrano, a pitcher who can hit. Now, what more could you ask for? A pitcher that wins 24, 25 games in the season, more or less indestructible, and then comes in as a pitch hitter and knocks home runs on a regular basis. What more could a manager want?
Due to the lateness of the hour, let's thank the speaker again one more time.
Thank you.